Okay, there we go. We're finally live on air, and welcome. Thank you for joining us. My name is Robert Kruger. I'm the host of the Anarchist Experience. I have a returning guest, Brent Lengel. He is a wonderful guest, has been on the show before. I've definitely enjoyed having our conversations. Actually, he's been on the show even with a group of people as well, and he was the most restrained and not in didn't go off into the crazy rantings like a fair number of people did on both sides of the argument. So I appreciate his willingness to have even-handed discussion and explore concepts instead of just yelling and pointing fingers. So thanks for coming on the show, Brent. Appreciate you joining me. So Brent, I
Yeah,
understand.
absolutely. That's actually one of the things that I really like.
Oh, go ahead. Apparently there's a little lag, so
Oh,
you go ahead.
yeah. I was going to say, actually, that's one of the things that I really like about your show. You do tend to go the extra mile to make sure that an actual conversation takes place, which sadly we don't see often enough on the internet.
Well, that's what my intent is just to have an open dialogue so we can explore some various different concepts. Um, Now, recently, there has been a discussion that you had where you wanted to kind of challenge somebody named Christopher Chase Rachels, who's apparently from the Free State Project. Is that right?
He's from the Blue Ridge Liberty Project, which
Oh,
is,
right.
I think it's associated with the Free State Project, but probably not like directly associated.
Now, they're kind
It's
of a competitor,
essentially,
actually.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah. And what was the nature of the disagreement?
The disagreement went down to a meme he'd posted about anarchism, where he talked about, specifically, it was about the NAP, the non-aggression principle,
Mhm.
which a number of ANCAPs espouse as something of a very important or even central moral tenet to libertarian ideology. And it's unfortunately a concept that I take a lot of issue with, both as an anarchist and philosophical standpoint.
Okay, and as far as I understand it, the concern that you have, or the criticism that you would have, is essentially what it is that what we're going to do is we're going to get ourselves into the top of the hill type of thing. We've got ourselves all of the wealth and property and big mansions and all this kind of stuff, and then we're going to go ahead and start this rule called the non-aggression principle. Now that we've got all of our stuff, so that other people don't take it from us, and that would be taking advantage of people who are in the situation where they've got not much to go on or very limited resources in their home, in their possessions. Is that somewhat of the criticism, or did you have more to the criticism than that?
I certainly have other criticisms. The meme that I posted essentially talks about that. I think what happens is that, and in fact, what's funny is there was an episode of the TV show Adventure Time which dealt with this, where it talks about how, in the beginning of the planet, in the real old days, it was just everybody fighting for themselves, which isn't entirely historically true, but the biggest, meanest, nastiest men went and they got all the best stuff, and then once they had all the best stuff, that's when they made the law and said, this is legal now, this is fair, and you guys, we've got all this property, and you guys have to work for us, and that's how it's going to work. So I think there is something to that criticism, even though it is obviously somewhat ahistorical. And I think that the NAP, one of its many, many problems, is that it is always seeking to buttress and support the status quo and the current property owners, and it doesn't really allow for movement of property aside through legal channeled means.
Or
Which
even illegal channel means.
yeah, exactly. I mean, it's essentially the way I view it is it's a truce, but it's a truce that lower class people or people who are not rich or wealthy should never support.
Right.
Because what ends up happening is they get to use violence against you through more insidious means, and you cannot strike back through, expropriation or even revolutionary violence.
Well, I know that you're going to be surprised if I said that that's a straw man.
You might, but let's go. Why do you think it's a straw man?
Um, well, I figured that you would assume that I would say a straw man because here's the position as far as I understand it. Um, you believe that apparently NCAPs don't support the um, reassessment of what we currently have in our society today of property ownership. That we
Uh,
wouldn't support a going through the books and saying, all right, well, here's what happened. This guy was doled out a piece of property from the king of England or whatever, and he didn't homestead the property. It's not his. We wouldn't do stuff like that.
You might do something like that, or you might not. I know that Murray Rothbard talked about expropriating property that was owned by corporations who had been given, bailouts and various, well, not bailouts, but various government privileges, corporate welfare, that kind of thing. However, I don't think that's. I think that's actually a bit of a red herring. The problem here is not that the property was not justly acquired. I don't care if it was justly acquired or acquired illegally. What I care about is this a good precedent going into the future?
Okay, and so let's talk about what the precedent is as far as what a lot of advocates they use the non-aggression principle as the kind of end-all be-all for the explanation of ANCAP theory. And to me, it's actually a very, I don't know, it's a bumper sticker type of explanation, and it doesn't really get to the heart or the meat of things. It's there to, kind of quickly explain the concept to people who are not anarchists or who have not explored these thoughts at all, so that they can quickly grasp the general concept of what it is that they're talking about, but it's actually a significantly deeper subject than that. That the non-aggression principle is it's too, I don't know, basic to actually encapsulate all of the things that we're talking about.
Yeah.
So
In that sense, I think it's very similar to the property is theft slogan that you'll see anarchists throw out. We do something similar with that.
yeah, definitely. When you talk with anarcho-communists or anarchists, as the original term was used, they do use the property is theft thing, and I'm sure that their philosophy is a lot deeper than that, and especially since they do support personal property.
Hmm.
So it's obviously a different it's a different concept that they just shortened into that brief phrase just to try to get the message out there. So
Yeah,
let's
it's
go
tough to
into
fix.
what was that?
I was going to say it's tough to fit an entire socioeconomic theory onto a sign. So,
Yeah, doesn't fit
and
exactly most bumper stickers on cars. It just doesn't fit. Yeah. All right. So let's go into the initial concepts as far as what the non-aggression principle is or means to, at least to me. And I would say that very large number of anarcho-capitalists would find that my perspective is the same as theirs. Um, Obviously, it would mean don't hit. You know, going over and taking someone and smacking their head with your fist, provided there's no other circumstance going on, would be an illegitimate act. Is that something that you would agree with? I'm sure that you would, most likely.
most humans would agree with that.
Okay, obviously. All right, and so physical violence towards a person who has not done something that would license that physical violence towards their body, towards their person, is not acceptable with the non-aggression principle, and most people agree with that. Pretty much, unless you're a whack job, you agree with
Yeah.
that concept. Yeah, maybe the big abusive guy thinks, well, no, I kind of like the idea of just being able to hit people. That sounds good. Um, all right, so then the next thing would be that if someone has a item, a piece of property, a physical object that they own, that this is now a subset of what is their control, and if you were to steal it from them, if you were going to take it from them without having any other precedent applied, that is also wrong.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Okay. Um, so then the problem with the non-aggression principle really comes up with when is it that the stuff that people own when is that legitimate or not? And that's really the disagreement. It's not necessarily the non-aggression principle that is the disagreement. It's that we have different claims about when somebody owns something.
Yeah, I'd say so, but I'd also caution you because I think there's also a core problem with where the non-aggression principle gets its um, authority from
Okay,
and how it is
yeah.
expressed.
Well,
But I
certainly.
mean, we can keep going down this road. I'll talk about that later if you want to.
All right, sure, absolutely. So when we deal with the non-aggression principle, just as a concept of, initiating an aggressive act is not legitimate, and the non-aggression principle is essentially a license to respond with violence to aggression.
Hmm.
So,
That's actually one of its.
it's
I
one
was
of
going to say, yeah, that's one of its problems actually, and I find that it can be used more to excuse violence while actually preventing no violence on its own.
well, the way I take it, and I believe the way that most NCAPs take it, is that it is an explanation as to when it is legitimate to respond to an act in what would be considered self-defense.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I'm sure that a lot of you guys take it that way. But there's some serious problems there philosophically. One of the big ones is that aggression is not an objective act. You can't go and scientifically decide, yes, 100% this is aggression, whereas aggression is more a subjective qualifier. What I'll give as an example is Gaza, the recent problems in Gaza with the IDF and the Palestinians who were living in Gaza and Hamas. If you ask the person who launched the rockets into Gaza or from Gaza into Israel and said, "Why did you launch those rockets into Israel?" that person would respond, "I was responding to Israeli aggression. We've got people
Right.
here living in an open air prison. We've got people starving to death. We've got people who can't get their medicine because of the Israeli presence, or that's a very large portion of it. So, in order to fight against this, I am in self defense launching a rocket at Israel." Then similarly, if you went and talked to the IDF, what they would say is, "We just got a rocket launched at us. Rockets have been launched at us from these people for decades. We are responding to and defending our borders with this attack, which killed, I think, something like 1,700 people, 80% of them civilians." Both would cite the non-aggression principle, and both would be correct in that they're being aggressed against. So, what are we doing here? We've essentially got a principle that's kind of malleable that can jump from position to position, and really what it ends up doing is it ends up powerful in that situation because they're the ones who are most likely to have their property rights infringed upon.
Okay, well, I would say that we could theoretically go back in time and find out where the aggression occurred, and it's fairly clear to me that the aggression occurred when the winners of the World War II established Israel and took that land and claimed it for the Jewish population and took it from people who had actually homesteaded the land and had it as their own. But then
Right.
you might go.
Though they would, if I might interrupt you, they would then go back and say, "No, look at the Bible. This is the land of Abraham. We homesteaded it when we fled from Egypt." But of course, even
Exactly.
if you go back and you look at that, they didn't really homestead it. They killed the people who were living there and took over the cities. So,
Exactly. So you go back in time even further, and then you finally find out, all right, well, this is the land that was originally homesteaded by,
yeah.
and there's your group, and then you move forward and try to
Except you
resolve.
can't find that group because it's so far back before pre-recorded history. There's no way of establishing that precedent.
Yeah, it is a very, very tumultuous environment. We don't really have the ability to, ascertain where, the ownership was legitimate or not in the anarcho-capitalist perspective. It's very difficult to go back so far in time. However, in moving forward in modern eras, we can certainly, keep track of that kind of thing fairly easily. Um, and not have it be this kind of a quagmire of he said, she said, and it's fairly obvious as to who is the aggressor and who is not. But yes, aggression is sometimes conflated with a lot of different things and can be confused as a term. I think that it's fairly straightforward and can be actually, empirically tested. All right, this is a situation where a person was doing their thing, they were on their own, somebody else came along and interfered with them in some way, that they, I don't know, restrained the person's hands, their body, or they took their property and destroyed it, or reappropriated it, or something along those lines. Those things are fairly clear, and a line of distinction is empirical. Wouldn't you say?
To a certain extent, yes, but it really depends upon the information that you have available. I mean, a really great example of this would be the second case that Cecily McMillan was charged with. She was charged with obstructing government administration. This is after she had been charged with and convicted of in my opinion, the false charge of assaulting a police officer. Her in jail because she engaged in some cop watching here in New York City. The police officers had the story that one of the things they tried to charge her with was burglary, because apparently one of the people, the cops demand said, "Let me see your ID." These out-of-towners who had been detained for jumping a turnstile or some other minor subway offense reached into their pocket to pull out their ID. Cecily McMillan intervened and said, "You don't have to give them your ID. You don't have to talk to them." And supposedly, according to police officers, what she did was she then grabbed their hand and shook their hand until the ID fell out of their hand, and the police officer said, "Okay, that's assault, and that's stealing the ID." Now, that's a ridiculous situation, though, because as we know, I can't imagine somebody with Cecily's history actually doing that, and two, most likely what we've got there is we've got a party exaggerating for their own effect. Like, probably what happened was maybe Cecily put a hand on their wrist and the person dropped it on their own. But you see, even in today's day and age with like smartphones and video, we can't really determine exactly what went on in certain instances like that. Especially when you have unreliable witnesses like the police officers in this case, and you could argue that even Cecily herself was an unreliable witness because she was specifically interested in remaining a free woman.
Absolutely. The thing that this points out, though, is more about the idea that we want to have whatever system of justice is in place, whether it be statist or whether it be anarchic or polycentric law, any of these types of systems that we would go with. We want to have them be as accurate as possible, and to have systems that are able to determine who was in the right and who was in the wrong as accurately as possible. But that being said, it's about the accuracy of things. That's not a claim necessarily about the non-aggression principle or anarchic law at all. It's just a claim about accuracy in the application of whichever law system that you use, isn't it?
It is and it's not, though I do think that any kind of a system, one of its major tests is how it works in practice. You'll often actually hear this from communists, where they'll accuse right libertarians of having no praxis in their idea, i.e. no process to what they're talking about, where you've got a lot of very, even noble ideals, but when you put them into practice in the real world, it's just never going to work. Now, there's also people that will accuse Marxists of having no praxis, or I guess maybe a faulty praxis, and we can get into that. That's a whole other subject. But I think the main issue here is, we talk about property rights, for instance, and we talked about if you go back far enough, you can't tell who was the first person to homestead. Similarly, here in America, I mean, it really, if we're going to go back and say, property taken by force, we should turn in this entire country.
Okay, you broke up there.
Going back to where we came from. I was saying we should really, if we're going to go back and talk about, people who had the original claim to land or property, white Americans should leave this country and turn it all over to the Native Americans because we did steal it from them by force and fraud.
Well, certainly a very large percentage of the landmass known as America was, in essence, homesteaded land that the Native Americans had. Definitely, there would be some sort of claim that they would have that would be legitimate, and the idea that there is no reparations due to them or some sort of compensation due to them to absolve, to seek redress for these wrongs that they have experienced. The people who make those types of claims, to me, they're they're certainly not very respectful of property rights and the homesteading principle. So if you see, like, I don't know if it's Hoppe or Rothbard or whoever it might have been, I certainly know that Ayn Rand was of the opinion, well, these people were just savages and they didn't even have any respect for property, so why would we bother with that? Come on, seriously. If you're going to actually have a principle, you have to stand by it, even if it means that the circumstances become kind of awkward. It's not an easy thing to go back and say, all right, well, we had these free-range farms of buffalo, and they were taken from us by people who have converted them into cities and things like that. So how much is a free-range farm worth, and so on, and trying to exactly identify how much is due. We don't know. It's a very difficult thing to do, but it's something that still needs to be done, even if it is hard.
Well, I will with you on. I don't know.
You're really breaking up there. I don't know what's going on. Your connection
will ever be. It's probably Time Warner.
Sorry about that.
Hang on. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, it's better.
Yeah, no problem. Like I said, it's Time Warner. Yeah, they have a monopoly. So is that. I don't really expect the Indians will ever be given back the land that is owed to them. Similarly, I don't expect there will ever be reparations for slavery, no matter how right it is that there should be. And the reason why is it's been too long, and there's simply not enough social power in the hands of these groups. And I think that kind of goes back to one of the reasons why I somewhat oppose the NAP as a principle, because I don't believe it can or will ever be fairly applied.
I see. All right. Well, I think that when it comes to, if we create the hypothetical type situations, we can certainly see that if we start from a premise of people entering into a new environment where it's a open environment where we haven't had all this stuff predating us, where we don't have to go back in time and say, all right, well, this person screwed over that person, this person screwed over that person, and all this thing got all screwed up. We could see that the non-aggression principle, if consistently applied, could move forward and be very viable. Would you agree there?
Well, yes and no. I would agree that if you're walking into a vacuum, a world that has never had and have no history by which to pull from, say everyone's minds were wiped and we don't have any clue what family we came from or where we are, we just find ourselves on a new planet. I'd say there you might be able to do it. But the problem with that is this is only going to be a temporary state, because as that property is settled and as people compete in industry or whatever, what's going to happen is you're going to find that they are some winners and some losers are going to come out of this. Sure. After a generation or two or three, all of the property is going to be owned. Infinitely more solution when dealing with the losers of those competitions. And I don't think that's a very just way to run a society in the long term. because it penalizes people who are born into circumstances that they cannot control.
All right. Well, first thing, I'm going to disagree with you about the all property is going to be owned. I think that it's absolutely a very short-sighted perspective of what happens when you have a thriving economy, where you have creative thoughts producing devices and equipment and buildings and all these other things that make it possible for people to live in fairly concentrated areas where they're actually getting to interact with people in a more social way, where they can build their own little sub-communities and have groups of friends and so on within these cities. And then you will find that the majority of people prefer to actually explore their productivity in areas that are not related to actually working land themselves. And so when it comes to the efficiency that we get when we can use machines and use land more efficiently, that you'll find that people are more interested in being in those types of locations and not interested in actually going out and locking up land and making it their own and producing off of it, because it's more efficient for them to instead be in a cooperation system where they're producing something that is a higher level of a technology instead of food, for example.
Absolutely.
So when we have people's man hours becoming very productive as far as the total purchasing power that they are capable of doing, and those man hours are in jobs or doing things that are that don't require significant amounts of land, and the less and less land is necessary in order to achieve these particular types of things as technology continues to improve. You don't really need a very large amount of land in order to, I don't know, become a web developer, or to be the I don't know, a brain surgeon, or whatever sort of service that you might provide, or whatever product that you might want to make. The amount of land that goes into the making of whatever product it happens to be is continuously reduced as technologies advance. Now, some of that is considered to be absolutely abhorrent, like the idea of having livestock all herded into a small location and so on. So then, we have changes in preferences that will cause more land to be used in certain situations, because people demand more, like free-range cattle and things like that. So more land is necessary in certain types of situations, but as a general trend, land is less and less necessary to the productivity that people want to have for getting the stuff that they like. Wouldn't you agree?
I would, but once again, that's you're only like pushing the problem a little further down the road, because as resources increase and as our efficiency increases,
Okay, you're breaking up again, dang it.
being efficiently used. I live in New York City. I've got an apartment in Harlem, which I pay more for a tiny basement apartment than I think I would pay for a whole house somewhere else.
Yeah.
And really, that's kind of what comes down to the problem here is I'm here in New York because it's one of the only places in the world where I have years and years and beat my head against the wall and nothing would ever happen. So when I come here, what I'm forced to do is to pay
Oh yeah, yeah. You're in a
island and
It's just.
yeah, and
I'm sorry
and
to
initially,
interrupt so much,
yeah,
but the your connection is kind of making your speech a little bit um,
choppy.
delayed and so on. So if I talk more on this particular interaction, I do it is partly because I'm trying to keep the conversation moving, and the
Yeah, no problem.
all right. So all right. So here's the thing. Obviously, you know that in Harlem that there has been a significant amount of interference within the market when it comes to providing housing. That there are limitations on developers that they can't just willy-nilly create houses. or apartment complexes, or condominiums, or whatever it may be. And nearby, you've got rent control. You've got all these different, manipulations into the free market system that are preventing the massive amount of demand for homes or for housing from being satisfied through what would normally be happening in market forces. So obviously, the prices that you're paying are well above what they needed to be if they were appropriately responded to by market forces. Now, there's a comment that was put into the chat on the YouTube here that let's see, it comes from Leo Riveron, and he says the need for endless growth, which exacerbates population growth, will result in all land being owned eventually. It's just a matter of time, again, because the core ethos of infinite growth. This is not true, and I'll explain why. You'll see that as you get into first world countries, that there's a propensity for people to stop reproducing, that their reproduction actually drops drastically. In fact, it comes to be a point where you start to see even negative population growth. And we've reached a point where there's too many people in certain cities that for people to feel comfortable, so they stop reproducing. The reasoning behind that is actually because of the opportunities that they have available to them to do other activities that are more enjoyable. If you have a family that's living on a farm hand to mouth, that has to work the land very, very hard and diligently, and don't have technology to make it easier, to make their labor more productive, when they get to an older age and they're unable to work as hard, they need to have someone there to pick up the slack, so to speak. And that's where kids come in. So then you have some more kids, and these kids are able to actually work the land while you're in your, on your front porch, sitting on the side there, and the kids are taking care of the work after you've gotten to your old age. And you'll see that in poorer, more agrarian societies, that you're going to have a larger incentive towards having children. But if you live in a city and where your work provides you a significant amount of free available money for you to use towards discretionary things, you can get yourself an Xbox, you can get yourself a gaming PC, and you can play video games all you want and have a great time playing those, or you can go travel around the world and enjoy all the things that's out there to be had, or you can, I don't know, create communities that do paintball or whatever these activities are. There's all these different things that you can do. Or you can have a kid. And it's not as exciting for most people. I mean, well, maybe not most people. Certainly a very large percentage of the population feels that enjoying one's...
Can I stop you there?
Sure.
Okay, he's not referring to infinite growth in the sense of infinite population growth of humans. He's referring to infinite growth.
I got that. Yeah,
he's referring to infinite growth as the economy must grow infinitely because it cannot outgrow the growth of debt, and you get into this essentially a race that you can never win.
I see. So we'll have to actually go into that in a little more detail then, because the problems that I've seen with debt, for example, are very largely associated with the creation of a government-issued fiat currency that is based upon a printing press that can, is not even in the hands of the government. They can't actually get their own money. They have to go through the Federal Reserve and so on. As far as that type of debt type of structure goes on, that's not something that anarcho-capitalists approve of. So if we're talking about the idea that, well, infinite growth as far as like business owners have an incentive to create their businesses and then expand their businesses and grow their businesses so that they can get more and more profits and continue to grow. There is a point at which certain industries becoming larger becomes less cost effective. There's a certain maximum size of number of employees that a person can direct as an employee. But
information technology makes that number smaller and smaller. And once again, even
larger.
I'm sorry, I said that backwards. Larger and larger. But even if you do that, you still have the problem that you have infinite growth required with finite resources. And if you ever stop growing, you have a massive economic crash, and we
Okay.
see what happens with that.
All right. Well, then we should actually look into that. All right. Now, as far as I understand it, what happens when you have supply and demand curves laid out as the supply of, oh, let's say, uh, sapphire, or no, sapphire can be manufactured. Let's say as the supply of rubidium or uranium, as uranium goes into less and less amount, so that we're starting to find that the resources of uranium becomes less and less available to us. But the demand remains steady or is actually growing. Well, the price for uranium continues to rise, and it becomes prohibitively expensive, making it automatically, um, what is it called, held in reserve for more important things. People, when they have, even like in,
Yeah, but I mean, is it really more important, or is it people who are more willing to the ability to pay? I mean, money is an abstract. It doesn't necessarily give. It doesn't necessarily choose what's most important. Maybe 90% of the time it chooses what's most important, but not 100%. And what happens is you run into some guy that wants to build his and cover his toilet in iridium because he's just that wealthy and he can just do that and show up all of his neighbors.
right, right. And of course, in our modern society that we're talking about today, we'll see these extravagancies that are just insane. Where you've got somebody, I want to make a yacht out of platinum, or something ridiculous like that. Or we've seen the gold throne actually being in the bathroom of Saddam Hussein and so on. So yes, obviously there are situations where wealth, if it's in an extremely large quantity, people will use it to satisfy whimsical demands. Um, now, this then boils down to, well, all right, how much of a disparity in wealth is there within an anarcho-capitalist system? Because obviously, I would say that wealth disparity does exist in an anarcho-capitalist construct. We don't have one to point at, but we can very clearly, see with the incentives that are available to that there will be disparities in wealth. That there will be people who will be very hard workers, who will actually, make investments into ventures that may have, certain amount of risk that become successful and rewarding, and then they become more wealthy, and this certainly does happen. However, the common criticism or complaint or fear, at least, that I see from a lot of people who are critical of anarcho-capitalism is that that this is going to continue to grow, and that there's going to continue to be this guy who's like just becomes more and more wealthy and higher wealthy. It's just not the way it happens. You can only be lucky so many times before you have those failures. There even in
Well, yeah, hang on for just a sec. First off, I kind of take issue with the fact that the person who has more wealth is harder working. In my experience, the average guy who goes into the MTA, who goes onto the trains in New York City and hoses down the poop and what else, other substances have gotten on the trains, works far harder than Michael Bloomberg.
Sure.
And when you get to a
Let me
system,
clarify
yeah.
that. Let me clarify that then. When I say hardworking, that is actually that is a misnomer, because anarcho-capitalism doesn't really care how hard you work. Not at all. It matters more how productive you are. All right. Whether
Right, and I'd say the guy who hoses down the subway car of like poop and dead homeless people is providing a much more vital service than Michael Bloomberg was as mayor of New York.
oh, certainly he was, because Michael Bloomberg's a complete blooming idiot.
Yeah.
He
High
does
five.
nothing except for leech off of people.
Mhm.
He's one of the banes of our existence. He's in the government and he steals people's money. He's running a racket and people are buying it. So obviously we're going to agree that Michael
Right,
Bloomberg.
but yeah,
Right, but let's just say, for
he
example,
was stealing people's money before he was in the government.
sure, he probably was, and he was probably using friends that he had in political office in order to maneuver funding for different projects, or or to create legislation that prohibited his potential competitors from, you know, making him actually do a legitimate and reasonable, product or service. But let's say take for example somebody who they have a family that they own the bar. So his dad goes into work at this bar, and he's a bartender and so on, and he's got this, I don't know, 18, 19-year-old child who is now somewhat of a man, and one of his drinking buddies says, you made a good pizza the other day. I really like that. What do you think about making pizzas for a living? And the guy says, that sounds like a good idea, and he gets a loan from the guy, the customer, and says, here's some money. Go over and buy a used pizza oven. And so the guy buys a used pizza oven, and he set it up in the back of the bar in one of the rooms that's back there. And he uses that in order to create his first pizzeria. And he starts making pizzas, and becomes fairly popular because he makes good pizzas. And so then he uses that capital that is now created by having gotten people to spend money on his pizzas, and he uses that to establish a storefront. And then he uses the money that comes from that, and he uses it to establish multiple storefronts. And then he becomes so popular that some people ask him, hey, you know what? I really like your brand name. Other people that, it's got a good reputation. I would like to give you some money to be able to use your brand name in my locale. And so then he creates franchises. All right. All along the way, this person has actually contributed and been productive in doing things that help other people satisfy their hunger or satisfy their desire for tasty cheese or whatever it happens to be. This guy has actually been doing things that are productive. All right. So yes, he can become extremely successful and become financially well off. He can create this industry called Papa John's, which is an amazing one. But at some point,
and then he can use the money from Papa John's to mess with the rest of us and take over communities, like, for instance, the guy who created Domino's, where he runs a community down in Florida where the stores won't sell birth control because he owns the town. And
yeah.
he's a religious fanatic. So here's the thing. Does financial success, does that necessitate political control?
Well, obviously, when it comes to political control, you and I both don't accept political control. So when it comes to how does it actually come to be that if you have an extremely successful person who's made all this money, how do we make so that that person's effect upon a community, which is fairly limited in size? Let's say you've got a population base of like 100,000 people. The number of businesses that are in that area that could be potentially purchased and then manipulated into creating these types of unfortunate circumstances where he doesn't. Let's say he goes in there and he buys up every single triage facility, all the medical places and all the stores, and he prohibits them selling birth control. All right. Mm-hmm. Well, in our society that we're in right now, a company that wanted to go in there and take advantage of the wonderful low supply of birth control pills and the wonderfully high demand for birth control pills because people like to have sex and not have to worry about babies too. This has created a great opportunity for another entrepreneur to come into that area. And there are barriers to entry which will affect whether or not that person can do so. And currently, the barriers to entry are governments.
Right.
Huge amount of red tape that you have to go through and so on. So, in your example, the solution for that actually is the free market because you've got something that's going to pay a lot of money. You can charge an arm and a leg if you were to go there because you're the only guy that can do birth control in that area. You're the only one.
Except this guy's a major landowner in the area. He owns all of the areas where you can go and sell those products. So he says, no, you can't come in here and sell your birth control. This is my private property that you're trying to sell it on. Get off my private property. And the fact of the matter is that once you have a large enough section of land, you can be extremely coercive with the way that you do it. In the thread, for instance, I talked specifically about imagine a poor community in the desert with a single well in town.
Oh yeah, the
Now,
well thing.
yeah,
I saw that. Yeah.
yeah. The well is owned by a person. Everyone must draw water from that well because other water sources are further away. And he owns not just the well, but all of the property around the well. So you can't even go in and drill a new well because you're violating his private property. Now, you have to do what he says. You have to wear what he wants. You have to put him into positions that he has. Maybe your daughters have to marry his children, all because he has this ownership claim that cannot be violated. Now, that's obviously a very coercive environment, and that's something we need to worry about. So clearly the ethical and, more importantly, the policy discourse has to go beyond simple property rights.
Well, sure. In that particular situation, it's a fairly contrived one, but obviously we have to deal with the fact that there is a limited supply of water and so on.
Yeah.
All right. So, number one, we're putting people out into the middle of a desert which had no water. Why did they go to the place that has no water? Okay, we have to kind of examine.
Yeah, this could be anything, by the way. In the real world, for instance, let's say it's the cure for AIDS.
Okay.
A rich guy's company invents the cure for AIDS. They won't allow anyone else to make the cure for AIDS, and
because of intellectual property supported by the government, which we don't believe in.
Right. But once again, let's say it's not. Let's say we don't use an intellectual property claim over it. Let's say.
All right. Let's say that they have a way of controlling the cure, such that it has to be injected by one of their personnel. Okay.
Yeah.
They've got.
Let's say there's a resource that it takes to make it that they own 100% of that resource.
Okay. All right. So. In the case of owning 100% of whatever the resource happens to be, it's never happened in all of history. And the other thing is that, as far as making such a situation happen, if the resource is usable and desirable and so on, the obtaining of the 100% control of it follows the laws of supply and demand again. And as the supply is available and the demand remains static.
Right. Go ahead. I get that, but you don't have to own 100% of it. That was just an example.
Okay. I'm just talking about the same principle that you are. I'm not necessarily going to say 100% is a requirement, but the same principle applies. As you approach 100%, as you approach making the resource scarce and scarce and scarce and more scarce in an environment where there is static demand, and you're creating an artificially high demand for it because of your plans for world conquest or whatever it happens to be. The increased price that you're going to be seeing for each additional unit of the product continues to go up, and it becomes prohibitively ineffective. All right, it becomes more and more and more expensive as you continue to reduce the supply while maintaining the same demand. All right, so the idea that there's going to be, this particular group that's going to somehow hoard all of the unobtainium that's necessary to make this AIDS cure, market forces work against that. So that's not really a viable, answer there as well.
Yeah, but market forces can work against it, but at the same time, it doesn't matter because human beings can control the environment around us, and we can manipulate the environment to manipulate market forces. A good example being the De Beers Diamond cartel.
Okay, and the De Beers Diamond cartel uses governments in order to do it.
Right, but it could do that without using governments if it was possible to maintain absentee ownership of private property. Let's say, let's eliminate the state. Let's eliminate all governments. But let's give the De Beers Diamond cartel, let's give them an army of robots. There's no government here. It's all just private property robots that will kill anyone who tries to get at these diamonds that they already have. And the private property robots are allowed to aggress because guess what? De Beers has bought up all of the conceivable diamond mines. But it's not just De Beers because they actually have competition. There is a Russian mining consortium, and there's also an
They work
Australian
together to
mining
create some
consortium.
sort of things. And I get where you're
Yeah,
going with this, but the things that
yeah. Why fight against each other when you can work together and screw everybody else?
well, because the if you actually look at the prisoners, what is it called?
The prisoner's dilemma.
Yeah, the prisoner's dilemma, and you look at the net profitability. In the end, it is always advantageous to defect in a cartel situation. So they will defect eventually.
So yeah, but why do we have cartels then? I mean, clearly the
Because
cartels,
there
and
are
in the meantime,
governments
everybody gets
which
screwed.
prop them up. There are governments which prop up these cartels and make it so that it's profitable for them to not defect.
Right, but in the absence of a government, won't the cartels just become the government? They'll step right into that power vacuum
No,
and take over.
okay. One of the things that's very critical about a government is the perceived legitimacy of it. That a society or of people in the area would say to themselves, well, these guys over here have their guns and they're just acting like complete jerks and they're taking over everything and they're abusing people and they're ripping us off and screwing us daily. And then somebody will say, no, that's the government. That's what they're supposed to do. That's government. We're fine with it. The fact that people understand government as being legitimate in what they do makes people not prevent it. If we actually had a society where the Beers tried to do that and actually enforce their control over areas that they have not homesteaded and just, all right, that's land, we're going to take dibs on that land over there, and that's where the goat farmer happens to be, running his goats. The goat farmer is going to say, well, who the hell do you think you are? Okay, well, we're going to get together with this guy, that guy, the other guy, and we're going to go on to get support from other interested parties in the area. We're going to, work together as a community or as a group.
You're describing a revolution.
Right, and they're going to pull, they're going to get out their guns and they're going to come over and fight. Now, De Beers certainly might win. They might have the guns necessary to create an oppressive system, sure, but it doesn't last for too incredibly long, because again, in a free market, you have business opportunities that are available for others, and that means entrepreneurs can come in. Now that there's no respect for this authority that doesn't exist anymore, called government, then you have other people who are like willing to just say, okay, well, you want to do that? See how I take you down. And maintaining control in that type of situation is a very expensive thing. So instead of doing something like that, where they're trying to run their government by force, which is not really a government because people don't believe it's legitimate, they find that it becomes more and more cost prohibitive and they can't do it. So the only way that they can maintain any sort of ownership of the area is actually to have a legitimately understood relationship with the society, where people going around saying dibs,
well,
nobody respects.
They don't. Yeah, they don't need it to be. They don't need it to be legitimately perception that it is legitimately understood. The fact is that if you have enough property and enough control over communication apparatus, you can manufacture that perception. De Beers Diamond Corporation can step into the role of the government and provide the services that the government provides, and use that as an example of its legitimacy, and can broadcast this kind of stuff all over the place as advertising. And the rest of us are sitting there saying, no, that's not true. But at the end of the day, when you have control over the media and the massive ways in which these information is disseminated, you have control over public opinion to a certain extent.
Yes, you know what?
Perfect
the same thing
control,
is true.
But it's certainly enough to legitimize your rule in the minds of enough people.
Oh, sure. You know what? And the same thing could be said of people who are going to try to come to power and become the heads of the anarcho-communist perspective. That well, we've already had these discussions, and it's very clear that Joe is the most popular, and obviously I am the most intelligent, and blah 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 blah. And what we're going to do is we're going to create this institution of where you have the people who are the most intellectually capable of running things. And so we're going to become your leaders, and look at how great a job we're doing in making sure that you guys all have food and water and so on. And then they can create a government in that situation as well. Obviously,
it's a nice Molyneux impression you're doing there, by the way. I like that.
Yeah. But obviously,
can I point something out really quickly?
Well, let me finish the thought and then go ahead. All right. Okay. So obviously, we have the ability for bad actors to act badly in every type of circumstance. And that's the reason why I believe that you and I both share this perspective that the goal is not to end the state. The goal is to end the belief in the state.
The goal is, are you done there, or did you cut out?
Okay. The goal is not to end the state. The goal is to end the belief in the state. If we were to get rid of governments right now, we would have another government come on back in very short order. The only way that we can actually achieve an anarchic society, whether it be anarcho-communism, anarcho-capitalism, or some other variant, the only way that this type of thing is going to actually occur is if we can get people on a broad sense, we're talking about the societal norm, to be one that says, no, rulers, we're not going to accept them. Unless you have a society that's like that, it doesn't matter if you get rid of the government.
Mm-hmm.
And you would agree with that?
Okay. I would agree with it to an extent. The problem is that not all authority is state-based authority. And there are ways to coerce people and dominate people. And in fact, a lot of the time there are better ways to do that than the state. One of the ways is through ownership of private property, or they'll die. Now, what I'm going to say about the anarcho-communism, I hear this a lot from ANCAPs. There seems to be this fear of essentially an oligarchy within an anarcho-communist system that tells everybody what to do. The problem is yeah, and that might be a valid criticism if you're talking about like Marxism with their vanguard party and their idea that you should hand power over to a specific minority within the community because they know what's best and they'll be able to guide us to full communism. But that's not how it works in an anarcho-communist society. In fact, what you find if you ever go to an anarchist GA is there is an intense hostility towards even the concept.
I'm sorry, you broke up.
At the end of the speech.
Could you repeat that, please?
We will occasionally. Oh, I was saying there are certain tactics. Yeah. So anarchists, for instance, don't even clap at the end of a speech. Occasionally you'll get like a little twinkle to show that people are liking you, but there are a number of social tactics employed to prevent exactly what you're talking about, charismatic, powerful individuals from coming in and running things. So if you talk about anarchists as people who naturally want to see who are naturally skeptical of authority, you will be attacked and criticized and taken down. And really this goes out to an almost paranoid level. Like, anarchists really do not like leaders. Sometimes, honestly, it can even be seen as a flaw because it can prevent us from organizing as efficiently as we otherwise would like to.
It most definitely can. It does put in limitations. I find that another thing that is critical is that anarcho-capitalists, well, we're willing to sell products or services to those people who would actually harm us. So
yeah,
we also have a similar type of problem. We'll make the rope that people use to hang us and sell it to them. All right.
I think Bakunin said something about that, actually.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that there's a large number of commentators who have made a similar assertion. I think that the rope one was actually a quote from somebody, I don't know who. Okay, so I think that when it comes to the idea that there will be this massive disparity of wealth, and that you will have somebody actually capable of creating these types of monopolies that you are concerned about, certainly it is something to be concerned about. That there is the potential for someone to create this adverse situation. However, the economics that go behind it actually do make it prohibitively expensive. Now, under the circumstances with the well thing, you said you made a claim that
is there a way to prove that empirically?
It's a fairly long topic to go through, and certainly would like to do so at some point. But unfortunately, we only have about half an hour, and I've got another topic I'd like to throw at you before we get to it. So at another point in time, certainly we can go through that discussion. All right, so with the well thing, I just wanted to add this one last caveat or whatever. You made a claim that, all right, well, that stops. They also can claim that, all right, well, you made another well about 200 yards that way, and it's using the same aquifer, it's taking my water, and therefore you are aggressing against me. The non-aggression principle would protect me, and I can use violence to protect my water rights. A lot of people aren't aware that there are more than one type of right to property or to different types of claims. And claims that are on resources that are renewing or renewable resources is not a property claim. It is a different type of claim. And there are different ways of managing how those claims work. So let's say if I live on a river and I'm getting drinking water out of it, it's going over a waterfall, and this turns it, and it's wonderfully pure water, and it's great. I happen to live at the base of this waterfall, and then some guy up the stream builds a dam, or siphons off all the water to be used for his electrical plant and using it for cooling. Okay, now my claim was not on the water that goes all the way back up the river and all the way into the sky, into the clouds, and where it all comes from, or the snow cap, or the melt, and all that kind of stuff. My claim was on the plot of land where this river happens to be. And then there is a different type of claim, which is reserved for water rights. And those are some things that you actually have to negotiate through different methods, and you would use a variety of different social constructs. You might have it be in an anarcho-communist fashion that is community type based water claim, that this resource which one person claims is all of his, no, you own the whole. Congratulations, you've got a nice long deep hole that goes down to where some water is. All right, well, somebody else made a hole. You can't stop them from making a hole. Sorry,
okay,
it's
well,
just not going to work.
What if that hole is on your property, though?
Well, yeah, if the hole is on your property, then yeah, you've got an issue. But the thing is, again, you're making this claim as if somebody can just go out there and say, dibs, everything that I see is all mine. Versus, all right, so what I did was I went out with my family and or some coworkers in a collective effort, or whatever it happens to be. I've got robots that I'm taking with me, or whatever it happens to be, where we go out and we build a series of buildings, aqueducts, all these different things. Okay, and we make it all. I make it all by myself, or with the tools that I have, which happen to be robots or whatever. Okay, and then somebody decides that they want to move in. Well, why are they moving into my space? Why are they coming into here? When there's other places out there that they could go and do whatever they want in those places, and you're creating an artificially constrained environment for the purposes of your particular question, which is doubly conflating the problem. Number one, the idea that somebody could own exclusively own all arable and usable land where there might be water, and number two, that they would have an infinite claim of all water that would come from all resources that could potentially go into that well. Those are two claims that are not being expressed by an anarcho-capitalist. It's a straw man.
Okay, well, this is interesting because you're the first. This is the first time I've ever heard an ANCAP say that there are different ways of claiming property and vice versa. So we'll definitely have to get into that.
It's not a property claim.
Well, what's the claim?
It's a water rights claim.
Well, how are water rights not property?
Well, it's a right to a stream of water coming in rather than, you're claiming I have the water that's there now, and the water that will be there tomorrow, and the water that will be there a week from now, and the water that will be there 2 years from now. All of these different, claims of future water resources that are going to be passing through the area. This is a totally different type of claim than what property is. And property is that, all right, I've got this plot of, let's say.
Oh, okay. So property is tied to the physical space, is what you're talking about right here.
It's a physical it's a physical thing that is rivalrous. There is only a certain amount of, yes, I can claim water as property, but the way I would claim water as property is I would say, put it in a jug or in a barrel. Okay, that water's mine. It's in a barrel. I made the barrel. I put the water there. It's my water. Okay, yes, I can have water as a property, but a stream of water that's continuously renewing itself through, the cycle of rain and so on. That's a completely different type of claim. It is not a property claim.
Right. Okay, so let's take this one a little further. Let's assume there's a town. They have their own water, and you go up and you buy the river above them. And
I buy the land where the river passes through?
Yeah, and then you say, this is let's say it's a very big river up there, so you create a hydroelectric dam, which then makes their wells go dry.
It wouldn't, actually.
Have you aggressed against
different example, something that actually takes the water and burns it off and makes it steam. Because the hydroelectric dam actually wouldn't stop the water at all. It would just go through the dam, and it would stop it initially.
Well, hydroelectric dams do have a severe impact on the ecology of the land below them. Yeah. I mean, I'm reading The Monkey Wrench Gang by Edward Abbey. It's all about that.
Yeah, it does, but it doesn't necessarily stop all the water from going through. But let's just take that example and convert it to like a nuclear. Maybe it's a nuclear reactor that uses rods that are being, burning off steam in order to generate power. So we're taking all the water and converting it into steam, and there's no more water coming out of this river. Mm-hmm. I think it's a better example.
Okay, use that one.
All right. So at this point, there is a claim. It's not a property claim. It's a claim of on water rights, and then you move forward with whatever the context of water rights in your particular society. Now, water rights claims can be determined through a variety of different methodologies. There's riparian rights, I think it is. There's all sorts of different claims about water rights and how they work. Water rights is a very difficult subject actually to go through and say, all right, this is a legitimate claim, and how do you make it, and so on.
There was a revolution in Bolivia because of water rights.
Yeah. And you'll find that in all actuality, you'll see more of an anarcho-communist type of approach to things like water. Water is not very well suited to, especially streams of water, flows of water, are more well suited to a community standard that says that this is everyone's type of thing. Mm-hmm. So
okay, well, let's take it. I love that you guys have. That's really awesome, and that's very good to hear coming out of an ANCAP. So thank you on that, Robert.
Right.
But here's my question though. Let's take water out of the equation. Let's use something like oil. You've seen There Will Be Blood, right?
Oh, sure. In the case of oil, again, we would basically have, in all likelihood, a group of people that would go out and drill. They would harvest the oil, and they wouldn't leave it in the ground, because another company would come in and drill a hole and go down and then parallel through the different technologies that exist and go into the same reserve and pump oil out that way. And so you would see that all the oil that is currently easily extracted from the earth would be extracted and then contained.
Yeah, but is that a good idea? And also, are you saying that, like, for instance, take the end of There Will Be Blood, where you have
I haven't seen the movie.
A holdout? Say what?
I haven't seen the movie, so please don't spoil it for me.
Okay, I won't spoil it for you. Let me use another example. Mr. Burns in The Simpsons.
Ah, yes. Mr. Burns.
Yeah, perfect. So there was the episode where Springfield Elementary, I like that. The episode where Springfield Elementary, they found out they were sitting on top of a large reserve of oil. And they were trying to figure out with how to spend the oil and what to do with the oil, and they were ordering various products. Everybody was going nuts over it. Mr. Burns came in and tried to buy the oil, where Principal Skinner turned him away, said, "No, you can't buy this oil. This is our oil. We're going to do what it is with it." Then Mr. Burns went over to his property, and he created Slant Drilling Incorporated. And on his own property, he built like a well that went in underneath theirs and tapped all the oil himself. Now, would you say that was a fair thing that Mr. Burns did?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. Absolutely. All right. The point is that what happens is that when you have resources that are used in a very important way, like oil is, the incentive is to get those resources and make them in a accessible, get them into an accessible location where you can, make your legitimate ownership claims about them. And so what would happen is essentially that you would see all of the oil wells be drilled and by potentially multiple parties and then vacated of oil. There would be no full reserve oil wells that actually have remaining oil in them after a very limited, let's say probably 40 years. Within a period of 40 years, probably all the oil that is in accessible areas would be pulled. All right.
Okay,
now,
but that
like
in and of itself.
Was that?
That in and of itself is that's kind of a terrifying precedent.
Yeah, it does sound
because.
scary.
Yeah, well, I mean, you look at what's happening right now with the tar sands up in Canada. What we're seeing is irresponsible practices for harvesting this energy from the earth, and what this seems to do is incentivizes a mad scramble to tear resources out of the earth as quickly and efficiently as possible without care for the environment or the people around them. And I think that could.
We are absolutely 100% going to support somebody's claim that, all right, you're pulling oil out of this ground over here, and all of my hogs are dead because you guys spilled all this oil and damaged my property.
Mountaintop removal, that kind of thing.
Right, and so the property rights are going to be fully respected there, and he's going to be given a fair compensation, and certainly is going to have punitive damages for the lack of regard that he was given, and so on.
Yeah, right. But I mean that's like when they say. That's like when they say this corporation is like, I'm going to break this law right now because I'm going to make so much money breaking that law that whatever punitive or penalties I have to pay are nothing. And what's going to happen is if you follow that kind of procedure, you might have to pay out a few fines to farmers, but what you're doing is you're destroying the earth for the future.
We're talking like serious money where people actually lose their homes for doing that kind of stuff. Here's how.
Did the CEO of BP lose his home?
Yeah, sure. CEO of BP might have his home and his children's cars taken away and stuff like that. Who knows? The law is going to change drastically. But here's how it would actually work. And I understand where your
why would it?
Claim is. All right, but it doesn't work the way you're thinking it does. All right. If there is a property that's nearby that might have damage done to it by my harvesting, okay. The initial upfront cost of me saying to that homeowner, saying, all right, well, I'm going to buy the rights to pollute your land, or I'm going to pay you to buy your land so that I can use it as a temporary storage for my oil excesses or drainage or whatever. So now he is compensated and moves away, all right? So maybe that land ends up having some ends up being used in a way that is something that you may not prefer, something that I may not prefer, but somebody who has placed a high value on that land for using it in protecting themselves from potential lawsuits. All right. So the preparation ahead of time would be the way that people would normally handle those types of things. There's no reason for them to take the risk to their potential earnings because of lawsuits that would have costs that are far greater than what it would be just to actually buy the property outright ahead of time. So I understand your concern, but in a society where they actually do respect property, it's not a realistic concern. The concern You
Well,
know,
my concern would be to respect the earth before you respect property. I would say that that we may not want that oil pulled out of the ground because the cost of doing so is too damaging to the environment around us. And
there are certainly people who feel the same way that you do, absolutely, and that's where we start to run into a variety of market forces. All right, so when it comes to the effective
well, I
damage,
mean, not just market forces. I mean, I'm talking if we're going to take a anarchist direct action view of this, I would say beyond market forces, there's sabotage, there's even possible physical war against the people trying to pull this oil out of the ground.
oh
I mean,
sure,
really, you really screw property rights at that point. You're kind of fighting for the future of the human race and the future of the planet, which would be arguably one of the most important fights that you could possibly have.
right. Well, let's just say for the sake of argument that we're talking about a plant that is going to suck out all this oil, right? And the plant, while it does this, is creating, um, it's shifting the Earth's habitat in some negative way. All right, we're having some negative repercussions that are occurring within this. Now, people have interests that they're, that they subjective values that they have, and one of those happens to be, I want to live in a place that is comfortable and enjoyable. And if the people are going to create such a change to the Earth's environment that it becomes not enjoyable, that is something that people will demand that go away, and so therefore they will be pursuing and spending money on those things that would prevent that kind of thing from happening. So these things actually do balance out, and you'll find that there are some. What will happen is that the company that is looking to get all the oil out of the area will take preventative measures to cause their effect upon others to be minimized. All right, because the gravity of how
Yeah.
much they affect those
Or,
others.
or they'll pay the press to just tell everyone that they're doing that, but not actually do it. I
Well, I'm
mean,
guessing that
what you're
if we're living in a society where the press is actually not propped up by a government, where you actually have the competing model of press, that you will see that people are very willing to give up a news outlet that is easily bought, and are more willing to go to a news outlet where they're getting information that is actually accurate and actionable. People
well,
don't like to buy stuff
who's
from
telling
Friday.
them that the news? Yeah, but who's telling them that the news source is bought? I mean, if the news source is big enough, it doesn't matter if it's being propped up by a government either way. But I want to kind of. I'm sorry. Continue. I lost
Right.
my
Well,
points.
all right. I'm just going to ask that you take this as a given, because having to explain how it works is fairly difficult. But all right, when it comes to news media, the amount of capital investment required in order to become a very prolific um, reporter on things is minimal in today's modern society, and the
Okay.
ability to become a reliable and listened to news source um, only takes the effort to be accurate, and that is something that people can do. And the idea that we would live in a society where we've got this gigantic news megalopoly that can use propaganda to advance the capitalist agenda is completely bogus. There's going to be competition in this environment. People want to get real news. They want to get real information. They don't want to get lies, and they don't want to buy. They don't want to watch stuff that is coming from um, the corporate interests. This, there are people who actually do listen to and pay attention to other news outlets right now that are not bought and paid for by the capitalist
Yeah,
order.
there are, but the problem is that when you have that corporate money behind you, specifically when you sell ads or when you do this, you have such higher production values and such a stronger signal than others. I mean, I occupied the WBAI news station. They're a great news source, which even in their marketing are completely divorced from corporate America to the point where they won't even sell ads on the air. They're supported entirely by listener contributions. Here's the
Absolutely.
thing: their entire network is going down, crashing in flames, and it's been going down for years and
But
years.
that's because the internet is taking it out. It's not because the corporate interests are. The internet is taking it out because the opportunities for other news sources that are on the internet that are just as reliable and not suspect, um, are growing. And
right,
so,
but then at the same time, you've got the cable companies, and we were talking about net neutrality, where they put in the internet fast lane,
and
and
again, we've got the
essentially what you
government,
have.
that's involved with this. So if we get the government out
Yeah,
of the picture,
well,
then the problem is again solved.
no, it's not, because you've got the cable companies controlling everything. The government, in this instance, is at least ostensibly coming down on the side of net neutrality, with what Obama's been talking about, where they're going to have the FCC regulate it. Now, there's problems with the FCC regulating things. I won't be a fan of the FCC because they're certainly not. But at this point, the alternative is to leave the internet in control of these major cable companies that provide the source.
That's true. And
Yeah.
you will find that, even, I don't know, let's just take a look at the cell phone industry and see what happened. All right, when you had a regulated and controlled environment, you had black rotary phones, okay? And then when you get the government out of the picture and let the free market actually create these opportunities for communication, lo and behold, we still all have incredibly powerful machines in our pockets that can, do all the cool things that we can do, and the advancements are drastic. So the idea that a free market.
But then you've got Apple sticking Bono's CD on everyone's iPhone 6. You have these powerful centralized corporations that have the ability to control how you access and how you use those phones. Now, you can hack an iPhone, or you can choose another phone, but really that's picking the worst or the better of two evils. Because at the same time, Galaxy could
drastic improvement in phone technology.
I would definitely say there's been a drastic improvement. I'm not necessarily going to say
in the free market.
I'd say that's one of the results. I don't think that I don't ascribe to the neoliberal philosophy that competition always results in better service. Competition always results in one thing and one thing only, and that's competition. And sometimes, or I'd say even most of the time, that can result in a better service. But that's not the only way to corner a market, and that's not the only way to get your product bought more than any other product.
Certainly, there are potentials for competition to create lesser results. I'm not going to deny that. The number of instances in which it would, though, are extraordinarily small. If you were to take the best possible, guy that throws darts and put them in front of a dartboard and have them throw shots at the bullseye, and then you take 100,000 other people and just have them all throw darts and then you take the best of the pick. Well, the one guy may actually, beat everybody. But the thing is, in competition, he's actually going to be available in that 100,000 people. He might be one of those people. So you're going to have that competition come out with the best dart throw, which is, the bullseye. So I would be hard pressed to find an example where I could say that by not having some competition. And we're not just talking about competition alone. We're talking about competition within the constraints that cooperating is essential to good competition. That you cannot do it all by yourself. That you actually have to bring in others and have them, do those things that you can't do as well. The specialization of labor and so on. These create opportunities for the competition to produce the better result, and the only way you're going to find the best possible result is by comparing it with others, and competition does that innately in how it's done. The only way that
if it does it fairly. But the thing is that this isn't let's all get together and have a fair game. This is business. This is people's lives and livelihoods and political power. And I think that what you're going to find with competition is that they sell you this idea that they like competition, and they sell you this idea that their competition is fair and that their product really is the best. Yeah, no, of course they don't want it. Yeah. So the other thing that I'll say is you're
breaking up again, please.
Earlier, when we were talking about the environmental degradation, said that market forces would respond to them democratically. However, in my experience, from what I've seen, that doesn't really happen. I think the last time I was on the show, I used the fact that Coca-Cola has hired mercenaries to murder union leaders in Nicaragua. That's now I still drink Coke, even though I know that they murdered people. And you still drink Coke, and probably after this conversation, you'll still drink Coke. Because at the end of the day, even though there's competition, they didn't murder anyone you know, so who cares?
There's not really competition in the soda industry.
Yeah.
It's one of it's somewhat regulated. I mean, we've got this formula that's being used for Coca-Cola that anybody can make, and if I make a soda that tastes just like Coke Zero, and I offer it at a lower price, or I have none of these flawed actions in Nicaragua to to tarnish my good name, well, who's going to buy Coke Zero when you can buy Krug Zero and get the same quality, the same experience, the same enjoyment, and the same benefits, and not be supporting people who are going into Nicaragua and acting like jerks and killing people. Obviously, if we actually had real competition in that environment, you don't see that people, just forget it, no biggie. They might, some people might, but there's enough of us that would actually give a rat's ass and do something about it by, changing to a different carrier, especially since the product is going to be similarly priced and certainly identical in flavor. So your examples are they're kind of
there's an episode
to come up with, and I can see that you're trying to achieve a point where you could make a point, and I think that there may actually be one that's out there that we would want to address, but your examples unfortunately are just not really they're easy to break.
Well, I would disagree with that, but I can see why you'd think that. Now, let's talk real quickly, because there's an episode of the Boondocks you really should check out. Have you ever watched the Boondocks?
No, I have not.
Okay. There's an episode of the Boondocks called The Block is Hot, and I'm going to recommend you go and you watch this after you get done here, because, again, this is a cycle of marketing that regularly happens within the industry that we have right now. The profit is not in necessarily giving a product that is cruelty-free. The product is being able to put cruelty-free or organic or whatever on Krug Zero and convince enough people cruelty-free. But the fact of most of these products that market themselves as all natural, cruelty-free green, it's all greenwashing, and they aren't really following through with what that stamp of approval says.
Right, and obviously in the United States and other countries where they have regulations regarding truth in advertising, that the government is the arbiter that determines whether or not the word organic can be used, and that you have to have a certain percentage and so on. And again, if we had a free market in the in the capture of whether
who's the arbiter in the free market?
Who's the arbiter in the free market? Well, you're going to have you're going to have a competition for that. You're going to see, well, all right, this group called Underwriters Laboratories is going to evaluate these products for safety, or you're going to have a group that's going to say, these people are reliable for their products, and they're going to put information on let's say eBay or Craigslist or Angie's List or whatever, and
right. We talked about this.
All right.
Except these rating systems, and we talked about this earlier, are more often than not just a scam in and of themselves.
Certainly,
we talked
some
about
of them
Yelp,
could be.
for instance.
Some of them could be,
most of them are. There's more profit in scamming people than there is in providing an actual service. Going above and beyond, that is way too expensive. And good satisfies people just as much as great does. Why make the greatest sandwich in the world that everyone is going to love when, for a similar price, you can create an inferior sandwich and put a lot less effort and skill into it? And that's one of the major problems with capitalism. Why make the next, brilliant film when you can just go and make Transformers: Dark Side of the moon. Less money goes into it,
Yeah, yeah.
and
You could achieve a
there's more
certain
return.
level of success with schlock, and yes, absolutely. I completely understand that. Um, and the thing that I would say to you is this: is that yes, when you start off with a society that is just now exploring a particular realm or subject material, or service or product, that good enough is good enough, and you're going to sell a lot of good enough. But then our standards change because we come into the environment and we're like, all right, well, that was satisfying. I really enjoyed it. But then people up their satisfaction requirements because we are always wanting better. Better is better. We always like better. Okay, and so when it comes to a free market of, let's say, for example, vision correction, right? Vision correction, in comparison with other types of physical fitness type things where health related concerns, is relatively unregulated by the U.S. government. All right, and you'll notice that in those particular industries, we had these innovations that came out with LASIK, and then people started to go into LASIK, and they sold a lot of LASIK surgeries and made a good amount of money. Then the prices dropped and dropped and dropped, and the quality went up and up and up as time went by. I mean, it's all fine and dandy to say, all right, well, what we're going to set out to do is make the absolutely perfect, the best possible table. All right, and we're going to make it out of mahogany because mahogany is very durable. And we're going to do all these great things, have it reinforced with some sort of polycarbonate lead, I don't know, maybe not lead, but steel that is really, really durable. And we're going to seal it and coat it with this stain-resistant stuff that's going to make sure that that this table is going to be able to last the years. And then we're going to make it carved in such a way that it is aesthetically pleasing, blah, blah, blah. And then people's preferences change, and they decide, you know what, I actually would prefer a table that had different design to it, different appearance to it. So then you've wasted all of this effort to create this incredibly perfect product that becomes less interesting, less valuable, less desirable because of changes in perspective and desire, and people's values changed. So it's nice to try to say that, all right, well, what we're going to do is create the best possible this, that, the other thing. But as time passes, our demands and desires change. So having something that is more flexible is preferable instead of trying to go for the best possible. And then as you start to see increased interest in the product or whatever, you create better and better types of products and continue to evolve with the demands and interests of people. But unfortunately, we have reached the end of our show. I do want to, again, thank you, Brent, for coming on the show, and I would like for you to tell people where they can go to read or hear what it is that you like to share with them.
Yeah, I have a show called Insurrection, carried on the StarCom, www.brentonlengel.com, and right on the front page you'll see a link to it. You can find my show weekly, broadcast on 22 U.S. radio stations, 132 international, plus satellite and internet. So you can find me out there once a week, and you can also find my writing. So brentonlengel.com is the website.
BrentonLengel.com, just in case you guys missed it, check it out, BrentonLengel.com. Again, my name is Robert Kruger. I am your host at the Anarchist Experience. Thank you for joining us. Have a wonderful weekend.
All right.